There are some places where you go looking for ghosts, and there are some places where the ghost seems to find you. NASCAR is supposed to be about numbers, lap times, horsepower, aerodynamics, pit strategy, reaction time, and a whole lot of a very expensive machinery traveling at speeds that would make most of us reconsider every life decision that brought us to the racetrack. But underneath all those numbers is something else: superstition. Because when you're climbing into a race car and preparing to go nearly 200 miles per hour, with inches separating you from the cars around you, you might start believing in luck. You might start believing in bad omens. And maybe, just maybe, you start to wonder whether some places are simply unlucky. One racetrack has carried that reputation more than almost any other: Talladega. For decades, fans and racers had whispered about something called the Talladega Curse, or the Talladega Jinx. Some say it began with Native American land, some said it began with a tragedy, and some say a curse was placed on the valley. Some people will tell you the track doesn't need a curse at all, because when you watch what has happened there, the place almost seems capable of creating its own. Today, we're going behind the checkered flag and into the darker folklore of NASCAR. We're talking about cursed racetracks, unlucky numbers, forbidden colors, peanuts that drivers supposedly won't touch, the strange story of Bobby Isaac, and the mysterious voice that told him to get out of his race car, and the question that followed Talladega for generations: what if the fastest track in NASCAR has always been a little bit haunted? Welcome to Nightly Haven. I'm your host, Nikki, and today's story is a little different because this one is for someone special. I recently lost someone I loved, and he loved NASCAR. And since I lost him, I've been thinking about things people leave behind. Sometimes photographs, sometimes stories, sometimes it's favorite song. And sometimes it's sitting down and watching cars go around a racetrack while someone you love quietly watches along with you. Well, at least until you fell asleep, because that happened pretty often. But heaven forbid you touch the channel on the Sunday, because somehow the second that remote moved, those eyes would open. And suddenly he knew exactly what was happening in the race. So today, this one is a tribute to him. A little NASCAR, a little history, a little superstition, and of course, a little darkness, because you know me. And I couldn't just make a normal NASCAR video, that would be suspicious. So buckle up, because we're going to Talladega. The racetrack that wasn't supposed to be cursed. Now, Talladega Superspeedway opened in 1969. At 2.66 miles, it was enormous. It was bigger than Daytona, faster, wider. And from the beginning, it was clear that Talladega was going to be different. The problem: the cars were going incredibly fast, and the technology wasn't necessarily ready for it. During the first weekend, tire failures became a major concern. Drivers were worried, teams were worried, and eventually some of NASCAR's biggest names decided they weren't going to race. Richard Petty was among the drivers who participated in the boycott over safety concerns. The track had barely opened, and already there was chaos. That doesn't necessarily mean the place was cursed. It means the people running it had built one absolutely ridiculous racetrack and then discovered that going really, really fast creates some engineering challenges. But then something interesting happened. Talladega developed a reputation. And once a place gets a reputation, people start seeing everything through it. A crash at another track might be just a crash, but at Talladega, people start to wonder if the track was taking another victim. A mechanical failure? The curse. A strange accident? The curse. A driver doing something completely unexpected? Oh, you already know where this is going. The curse. NASCAR itself has acknowledged the Talladega legend, including the story that the speedway was built on an ancient Native American burial ground. But there is an important distinction. There's no verified evidence that the track was built on a burial ground or a supernatural curse was placed upon it. In fact, the burial ground story has been described as a legend, but the legend didn't stop there. Creek Curse. The story has several versions, and that's usually how you know you're dealing with folklore. One version says that the land around Talladega was taken from Native Americans during the era of forced removal. Another version says that the area was connected to the Creek people and that Medicine Man had placed a curse upon the valley. Yet another version tells of a Native American chief who supposedly died after being thrown from his horse during a race. And then there's the version that says the racetrack was built over an ancient burial ground. Different versions, different details, same basic message. Something happened here before the race cars arrived, and whatever happened wasn't happy about what came next. Now, this is where we need to be careful. These stories are legends, they shouldn't be presented as established Native American history. There's no reliable evidence proving that a Creek medicine man cursed Talladega. There's no archaeological proof establishing that the Superspeedway was built on Native American burial ground. And there's no historical record proving that a chief died in a horse race exactly where the track now sets. But here's the strange part. The legend became so deeply associated with Talladega, it became part of the track's identity. And eventually, people began collecting the strange events, almost like evidence. And one of those events happened in 1973. The voice in Bobby Isaac's car. Now, this one is the strangest stories in NASCAR history, and unlike some of Talladega folklore, this isn't simply a ghost story someone invented around the campfire. Bobby Isaac was a NASCAR champion. He won the 1970 Grand National Championship. He was an accomplished driver, a professional, a man who understood racing. But in 1973, something happened at Talladega that would follow him for the rest of his life. During the Talladega 500, Isaac was racing when he suddenly began hearing a voice. According to accounts from Isaac and people close to him, the voice told him to get out of the car, stop, pull over, and get out. Isaac listened. He pulled into the pits and refused to continue. NASCAR records the story as an abrupt departure from the race, with Isaac telling his team owner, Bud Moore, that he needed someone else to take over the car. Isaac's wife later said that when he reached a telephone, he told her exactly what had happened. A voice had told him to get out. And this wasn't the only unsettling thing that happened that day. Earlier in the same race, another driver had died. Larry Smith was involved in a crash that appeared relatively minor by Talladega standards, but he suffered fatal injuries. And Bobby Isaac was still in the race when he experienced the mysterious voice. That coincidence has become one of the darkest pieces of Talladega folklore. Did Isaac somehow sense danger? Was the stress of racing at enormous speeds affecting him? Was it simply a strange auditory experience, or was there something else? We don't know, and Isaac never gave us a supernatural explanation. He simply said what he experienced. He heard a voice and he obeyed it. The day Talladega got its reputation. The strange incidents didn't stop there. In fact, the early years of Talladega were filled with enough accidents, injuries, mechanical problems, and tragedy to make people start connecting dots that might not actually have been connected. That's how a curse works. Not necessarily because something supernatural happens, but because people remember the unusual things. Imagine watching a race, 100 cars, high speeds, tight packs, drifting, cars inches apart. Then suddenly one car moves, another moves with it, someone touches the bumper, and suddenly the entire field becomes a metal tornado. Talladega became famous for this kind of racing, the infamous big one. One mistake can become 20 mistakes. One car can become 10. 10 can become 30. And when the smoke clears, fans are left staring at twisted race cars scattered across the tracks. To a statistician, that's physics. To a racer, that's super speedway racing. To someone who believes in the Talladega Jinx, that's the curse stretching its fingers across the asphalt. And Talladega has some spectacular examples. In 1973, a massive crash injured multiple drivers. The same season saw Larry Smith's death and Bobby Isaac's bizarre experience. Then came more tragedy, and every new incident added another chapter to the legend. When the curse got weirder, one of the things that makes Talladega folklore so interesting is that not everything involves a race car crashing. Sometimes the strange stories happen around the track. And there have been mechanical failures, odd accidents, unusual injuries, and incidents away from the racing surface. The distinction matters because if we throw every tragedy into the word curse, we stop telling history and start manufacturing mythology. But mythology is exactly what happened around Talladega. The track developed a personality. Fans began calling it Digga. They called the race weekends wild. They joked about the track being cursed, and eventually the jokes became tradition. Even NASCAR has played with the mythology. The sport has published material discussing the Talladega Jinx and the legends surrounding it. At one point, the track even hosted a Native American blessing ceremony. In 2009, Creek medicine man Robert Thrower performed a traditional blessing ceremony at the track, asking for balance and reconciliation. And honestly, that is one of the most interesting parts of the story because whether you believe in a curse or not, people were taking the legends seriously enough to acknowledge the history and symbolism surrounding the land. The Green Car Curse. Talladega isn't the only place where NASCAR gets superstitious. Racing culture is packed with traditions that sound completely ridiculous until you're the one sitting in the car. One of the oldest, green cars. There has been a long standing superstition among racers that green is unlucky, and you might be thinking it's a color. Exactly. That's what makes it so funny. NASCAR drivers can climb into a vehicle traveling around 200 miles per hour without blinking, but put a little green paint on the thing, and suddenly everybody becomes a medieval peasant yelling about witches. The superstition goes way back. Some racers have avoided green, some teams have embraced it anyways, and plenty of modern drivers have raced successfully with green on their cars. So, statistically, green isn't cursed, but superstition doesn't care about statistics. Whatever you do, don't bring peanuts. This one might be my favorite because apparently peanuts are dangerous. Not nutritionally, not because someone is allergic, not because NASCAR discovered that peanut butter is somehow an aerodynamic disadvantage. No. According to old racing superstition, don't bring peanuts into the garage or pits. This is one of those traditional racing superstitions documented in NASCAR culture. Green cars, peanuts, and certain denominations of cash? Yes, cash. Specifically, the $50 bill. Some old NASCAR superstitions say that you shouldn't carry a $50 bill in the garage, and there are stories about drivers avoiding them because they were considered bad luck. Now, think about the absurdity of this. You're about to race a machine capable of incredible speeds. You're surrounded by gasoline, hot engines, spinning tires, and thousands of pounds of metal, but someone pulls out a $50 bill, and suddenly everyone is concerned. Yo, put that thing away. It's one of those traditions that makes racing culture so fascinating because superstition doesn't have to make sense, it just has to be believed. And once enough people believe in something, it becomes tradition. The number 13. Then there's the number that already had a reputation before NASCAR ever got involved. 13, the unlucky number. And NASCAR has its own history with it. The number has traditionally been avoided by many racers. According to historical accounts, dozens of drivers have used the number 13 in NASCAR's Premier Series, but wins have been extremely rare. Johnny Rutherford won a Daytona qualifying race in the number 13 in 1963, and that had stood out as a major cup level victory associated with the number in historical accounts. So, is the number 13 cursed? Probably not. But if you told a driver you can have any number you want and then offer them 13, you might get a very quick answer, no thanks. And I can't blame them. If I'm getting into a race car, I'm taking the number 88 or 7 or maybe 3. Something that doesn't look like it was personally sent from the universe to ruin my afternoon. The Daytona 500 Curse. And then there's another idea that NASCAR fans had debated over the years, the so-called Daytona 500 Curse. The basic idea is that winning the Daytona 500 could somehow make winning the championship that same season harder. Now, before anyone gets angry at me, this isn't a supernatural curse. It's a statistical pattern that fans have sometimes interpreted as a jinx. And honestly, that makes it even more interesting because racing is one of those sports where statistics and superstition constantly fight with each other. A driver wins the biggest race of the season, and suddenly everyone expects them to win everything. Pressure increases, expectations increase, the competition adjusts, and sometimes the championship slips away. But fans don't always say, interesting statistical anomaly. They say, yep, Daytona got him. The big one. If Talladega has a signature phenomenon, it's the big one. The giant multi car crash. The moment when everyone watching the television suddenly stops breathing. You could feel it coming. Cars are running three wide. The field is bunched together. Someone gets loose. Someone moves up. Someone moves down. And then, boom. The entire field explodes, cars spinning, smoke fills the screen. Pieces of bodywork go flying. And suddenly you're sitting on the couch yelling, no, 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 no. Meanwhile, the driver you were cheering for is somewhere inside the smoke trying to figure out whether they are facing north, south, or possibly the moon. This is the part of what makes Talladega so unique. The track isn't necessarily cursed. The racing itself creates an environment where one tiny mistake can affect enormous number of cars. At speeds that high, there isn't much room for forgiveness. And maybe that's why the curse feels believable, because Talladega doesn't need supernatural forces to produce chaos. It already has physics. But what if the curse isn't the track? Here's where the story gets interesting. Maybe the Talladega Curse isn't really about ghosts. Maybe it isn't about a medicine man. Maybe it isn't about a burial ground. Maybe the curse is simply the human need to find meaning in randomness. Think about it. A driver crashes, we want to know why. A tire fails, we want an explanation. Someone hears a voice, we want to know who spoke. A championship favorite loses, and we want to know what went wrong. And when the answer is sometimes terrible things happen for no satisfying reason, that's not a very comforting story. So we create another one, and we call it a curse, and suddenly the chaos has a name. But there's another possibility. Maybe superstition exists because racing is one of those places where people understand how little control they really have. You can build the perfect car, hire the best crew, have the best strategy, practice every corner, and then one little piece of rubber decides your entire afternoon. So maybe you knock on the car. Maybe you keep a lucky object on the dashboard. Maybe you avoid green. Maybe you don't bring peanuts. Maybe you don't carry a 50. Maybe you don't use 13. Not because you genuinely believe the universe is waiting to punish you, but because when you're about to do something terrifying, a little ritual makes you feel like you're in control. The people behind the legends. And that's something I think he understood because if you love NASCAR, you don't just love the cars, you love the people, the drivers, the crews, the families, the fights, the victories, the heartbreaks, the moments that make you just sit there and watch every lap. And sometimes you don't even have much to say. You just sit there, you watch, you listen to the engines. Maybe you slowly fall asleep halfway through the race. But whatever you do, don't touch that remote because apparently NASCAR naps are secret. And that's the part people don't always understand about sports. Years later, you may forget the exact finishing order, but you remember who you sat beside. You remember the sound of the television. You remember those Sunday afternoons. And sometimes those ordinary moments become the memories you treasure the most. That's why I'm making this video, because he loved NASCAR. And now every time I hear those engines, I know there will be a little piece of him there. Maybe that's the real opposite of a curse. A curse is something that follows you. A memory is something you carry. So, is Talladega really cursed? After everything we talked about, the honest answer is we don't know. There's no verified evidence that Talladega Superspeedway is supernaturally cursed. The Native American curse stories remain legends. The burial ground story remains unproven. The horse racing story is folklore. And the strange events can generally be explained through dangers and unpredictability of motorsports. But Bobby Isaac really did say he heard a voice. The early Talladega races really were plagued with safety concerns, and drivers really did boycott the first major race because they believed conditions were too dangerous. And Talladega really has produced some of the most chaotic racing in NASCAR history. So maybe, just maybe, the curse doesn't need ghosts. Maybe the curse is simply the combination of speed, pressure, machinery, weather, human beings, and chance. Put all of those things together, and eventually something strange is going to happen. And when it does, someone's going to be there to tell the story. Then someone else will tell it. And eventually, it's a legend. One last lap. There's something beautiful about old racing stories. They don't really disappear. They get passed down. A father tells his son about a driver. A mother tells her daughter about a race. Friends argue over who was the greatest. Someone remembers sitting beside the grandfather watching the Daytona 500. Someone remembers the sound of the engines. Someone remembers a favorite driver. And eventually, someone remembers us. That's what stories do. They keep people around a little longer. And today, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to give one of those memories a place to live. Maybe somewhere beyond this world, there's a racetrack where engines never stop, where the grandstands are full, where the green flag drops, and where the people we lost are sitting together again, watching their favorite drivers come around the final turn. And maybe, just maybe, he has a seat there too. Maybe the race is on, maybe the engines are roaring, maybe he's sitting there quietly watching, and if we're being honest, probably asleep. But heaven forbid somebody change the channel because I have a feeling he would still know. So this one's for you. Until we meet again, keep the engine running, keep the memories alive, and never forget sometimes the stories we tell about the people we love are the closest things we have to keeping them with us. I'm Nikki, this is Nightly Haven, and I'll see you in the next one.